Alright, so welcome to this track guide for the Le Mans circuit. Going to take a look at my fastest lap from our most recent practice session, which was a 3 minutes 14.396 in race trim. The 13 was in qualifying trim, so we'll take a look at this race lap. Going to talk about braking markers, turning points, reference points for the track limits, which are very important around here, as well as the boost pattern that I use today, although it's probably subject to change as I continue to practice for the race. So we're here on the start-finish straight. So turn 1 is a right-hander, so sitting up on the left-hand side. Let's watch turn 1 all the way through, and then I'll go back and break it down. Okay. So the turn-in for this corner is basically right there. So right about where the pit lane ends, and we have the blue cone, just before there is when I am turning in. The turn-in is done entirely flat, and then as soon as you're straight, pointing parallel to this curb is when you're braking. So as far as the corner itself, you can see that on the entry, I'm widening it as much as possible with basically all of my car on this area outside of the track surface, but iRacing considers it to be perfectly in bounds, so there's no issue there. And then just putting my right wheels on this curb. It is possible to use more of the black surface on the inside. I find that it unsettles the car and makes the braking more difficult. And if you get greedy with it, you'll pick up a slowdown that they've introduced since last year. So personally, I don't. I just touch the curb with my right wheels, and then as soon as the car is in a straight line, braking down to second gear for the Dunlop chicane. Okay. So pretty standard approach to a chicane. So turning in a little bit after the Total sign on the right-hand side. So you can use the curb. You don't want to use too much of the area on the inside because you have the yellow sausage curbs, but touching the curb with the left wheels. And then here you can see I actually take probably a little bit more space on the inside than I should. You can see it's quite bumpy, and I'm not able to, the traction control is stopping me from getting on the power. So you actually don't want to touch these sausage curbs as I did here. You want to use a little bit less room. And then as far as the track limits here, basically you just want to keep it to the left of the red and white marker boards. That's basically authentic to real life. And now accelerating down the hill. Okay, so that the left followed by the right there, those are flat, and basically you're just taking the shortest line in order to set up for the next real corner, which is the third gear sweeper here. So just keeping it tight on the left-hand side, grazing the curb, and then bringing it over to the right, cutting a short line. And so my braking point for that is it's about halfway between the last marker board and this the service road on the right-hand side here. There isn't a great reference, but it's about halfway between those two. Braking down to third gear. So a few things to cover in this corner. You'll notice I'm not using the curb here. That's intentional. I find that this curb, just because of the camber of the track, can unsettle the car, so I don't use the curb, just running to the right-hand side of it. And then just grazing the end of this curb. Again, taking too much of it, especially with the curb being sort of bumpy on the inside, can unsettle the car. Now, the reason I'm being cautious here is because the exit curb here, you're not really hitting it in the middle. You're hitting it towards the end, and if you get that wrong, the car is unsettled, you're not able to get turned in as well, then you're running into the grass, and you can see that the grass is very shortly followed by a barrier. It's very easy to unsettle the car, maybe have to catch a slide, run wide, and go straight into this barrier here. Someone will do that on lap 1, pretty much guaranteed. You don't want that to be you. So I'm a little bit cautious through this corner. But you can see that basically once once I'm about where that sort of strip of pavement is on the inside of the third gear left-hander, then I'm flat, coming into Tertre Rouge. Okay. So Tertre Rouge is a very important corner because it's your entrance onto the first part of the Mulsanne Straight. So you can see it's kind of halfway in between that marshal post and the orange marker boards is the turn-in and braking point. So it's just a quick brake down to fourth gear. It is possible to carry fifth. I find you get better drive by shifting down to fourth. And then you can see hard on the power right here at the apex. And then the exit is also quite important. So you can see that I'm actually running out past the curb. So this is one of the two zones where they allow you to be a little bit cheeky with the track limits. So there's this blue and yellow striped runoff area. That's your track limits. But as soon as it ends, the zone that you're allowed to take ends as well. So by the time this zone ends, you have to be... I'm over the curb here and slightly on the track. That's about the limit of where you can be. If you run out too wide and sort of cut through this triangle of unmarked pavement here, you will pick up a slowdown. I think it's a 2-second slowdown, and of course it's iRacing, so you lose about 5 seconds in the process. So turning in and braking down to fourth gear, hard on the power. And basically right as I know I'm back on the track is when I start boosting. So I am going to boost until I hit the bottom of seventh gear. So boosting up through fourth, fifth, sixth. No, this must be seventh. I've missed an upshift somewhere. But so boosting until I hit seventh gear. And now you get a little bit of a break coming down to the first Mulsanne chicane. So let's watch it through once. So there's essentially two parts to this first Mulsanne chicane. There's the braking zone, which extends through the right-hander. And then there's the acceleration zone, which starts here at the apex and extends through this right-hander as well. And so the left-hander is sort of the transition between those two. So the braking point for this one is sort of halfway in between this marshal on the left-hand side and the yellow mark of the guardrail to indicate the service road. It's about halfway between that and the 100-meter board. So braking down, and you can see very hard on the brakes, close to 100%, and then bleeding off the brake pressure as you are losing downforce in the car, but also turning in as well, so you can't carry the same brake pressure through. And then right about here is where I start accelerating. You can see hard on the power immediately, leaning on the traction control, and that's the exit of the corner. So braking down to second, turning in basically so that for the last part of this braking zone, as I hop over this curb, I'm pointing in basically a straight line at the next curb. I don't have to do very much turning, and you can see a little extra blip of brake there as well. So once I get turned in, a little bit of extra brake just to get the car slowed down. So as far as the track limits, you basically only want to use the curbs. You don't want to hop over them and use any tarmac on the inside. You'll pick up a slowdown from there. But you can see here I'm riding the curb. You know, my wheels are over it. They're on the black tarmac area. That's fine. You just don't want the center of your car to be to the right-hand side of this exit curb. So boosting out of this corner from second gear all the way up until I hit the bottom of sixth gear. So sixth gear is unboosted up to seventh gear. Yeah, so a little bit wide into that chicane, actually. I carried a little bit too much speed. So I will break it down as it should be done, not as I did it. So you can see braking is right before the 100-meter board. Again, second gear down to second, or seventh gear down to second gear. I didn't quite touch the curb here, and the reason is that I was carrying a little bit too much speed and couldn't get the car turned in. So if you look at my brake trace, yeah, you can see I start getting off the brake quite quickly, and I needed to use more brake pressure there to essentially take care of more of the speed in a straight line. That would have enabled me to get the car turned in, just grazing this curb here. And then again, the apex is sort of right after those green bollards on the right-hand side. And I'm apexing and getting on the power quite late, because I have to wait until the car is going to be able to actually get on this curb here, not using any of this area on the left-hand side. Now, the line on exit here is quite important. With the first Mulsanne chicane, it's relatively straightforward. You're just trying to take a nice swooping arc to maximize traction and get a good acceleration. It's not quite so simple here. So you can see that I'm cutting over to the left. I'm not using all the track width on the right-hand side. And then through this kink here, I'm not using the track on the inside. Now, there's a very good reason for that, which is that somewhere between kind of this Marshall post and then where those two guys are, there's a nasty bump. And something that you'll see someone do at some point. You'll quite often be catching up to a slower class car through this second chicane. And it's tempting, because you have a boost button, to apex late, cut it to the right, and then just try and go around the right side of them. And what it's very easy to do as a result is hit the bump that is there somewhere, because you're using this extra area of track. It can unsettle the car, you can do floor damage, and you can even spin entirely and get sent to one of the barriers. So the line here that I'm taking is basically correct. I'm not using the rightmost area on the track here, and then just swinging a little bit left to set up for the kink. So now coming into Mulsanne corner, I think I went a little bit wide here too, so we'll take a look. Yeah. So again, I'll cover it as you should do it, not as I did do it. So you can see basically grazing this cone on the left-hand side, still flat at the 100-meter board. And then the braking starts right before this curb starts. So you are, through your braking zone, you're apexing over this curb and basically pointing at this orange cone there. That's sort of what you're aiming at as you start braking. So you're trying to basically, in your braking zone, cut a straight line, as straight as you can, from this curb, apexing over the curb, to the orange cone, which is basically your turn-in point. Now, you look at my brake trace here. Again, same as the second Mulsanne chicane, I made the same error of not maintaining brake pressure through kind of third gear, fourth gear. Didn't bleed off enough speed, and so couldn't get the car turned in, ran quite wide. But you want to be apexing over the curb. You don't want to touch the green bollards. They're quite close to the curb. So you just want to run your right wheels on the curb, and a little bit over it is fine. And then exiting onto this curb here. And that'll be down to first gear. So now, heading down the back straight, I will normally boost up to either fifth or sixth gear, depending on whether I have reserve boost that I want to use or whether I'm trying to conserve. And so we'll take a look at Indianapolis, and then I'll break it down. Yeah, that was okay. Indianapolis is something I'm still working on getting a feel for since last year, but I'll break it down for how I know it today. So you can see, if you look at the left-hand side of the track as you're approaching the 100-meter board, you have this red painted strip of pavement, and then there's this green bit of, I don't think it's AstroTurf, but it's not very grippy. There isn't traction, and I think it's there because you would otherwise use it. So just to the left-hand side of it, And basically, right as the center of this green patch is the turn in, and you can see as soon as I turn in, I'm starting to brake. It's light brake pressure because you are turning. It's a high-speed right-hand kink, and I don't use the curb here. I'll just sort of graze it, but I won't actually use it. I find it unsettles the car. And so you're braking through here. You're going to track out left as a result of the high-speed kink, but you want to take a diagonal line as I am here, going back over to the right to set up for the second part of Indianapolis. I don't get quite as far over to the right as I probably should. You can see there is a curb there, and you essentially want to be there. So the way the corner should work is that center of this zone is when you're braking down to probably 5th gear or so. Then as soon as you can straighten the car out and center it over the platform of the car, then you want to be doing your harder braking, getting down to 2nd gear so that you can accelerate off of there. So the exit that I took was pretty good there, but I don't think I got the braking quite right, and so not carrying as much speed as I could as a result. No boost coming into this corner. The braking zone is just before the 50-meter board. So a couple things about this corner. It's quite easy to lock up and run wide. There are a couple different ways you can do it. First is getting greedy, trying to use the left-hand side of the track. If you start braking and then you're over to the left-hand side and you hit the curb, that transition in the amount of grip available to you will make you lock up. So you will run wide. And the other thing you don't want to do is take too much curb here. It is pretty bumpy, and it'll sort of bounce the car out to the outside. It's fine to use the curb here. If you do use the little green painted area, you'll pick up an off-track. And those add up over 24 hours, so you'll want to avoid that if you can. So braking down to 1st gear. And now on to this straight. So again, this is a zone where, depending on whether I'm trying to deploy or conserve boost, I'll boost up to either 5th or 6th gear. So now coming into the Porsche curves, probably the most technical section of the track. We'll take a look at them, and then I'll break it down. A little bit wide there. Okay, so those are the Porsche curves. So in 7th gear, coming down to the Porsche curves. And again, this little green painted area of lower traction pavement is your turn-in and braking point. So not maximizing the exit of this corner and tracking out to the left, because you want to set up to the right so that you can take this part of the curb flat. So it is down to 5th gear, braking and turning in, and then just cutting a tight line around this curb and setting up to the right for the 6th gear left-hander. So you can see at the exit here, quite close to the barrier. So you have the curb, which is pretty small, and then the Tech Pro barrier on the right-hand side, which will kill you. So I don't use that curb at all. Some people do. I don't, because there's not a lot of time to be gained from it, and there's a lot of time to be lost if you touch the barrier. So just running over that curb there. And then this right-hander is much like the first right-hander in the Porsche curves, where you're really just trying to cut a short line. You're not trying to maximize the corner as an individual corner. You're trying to use it to set up for this turn. So you can see that I actually, as I turn in and brake, I have a little bit of a slide that I have to catch, and then I'm not really running very tight around this curb as a result, so that's a mistake. But the important thing is this curb, or this corner, which is your acceleration zone as you exit down towards the pit entry and the Ford chicanes. So it's 5th gear. Just touching this curb here, not touching the yellow sausage curbs. Obviously, that'll unsettle the car. And so this is another this zone here, the yellow painted zone to the right hand side of the curb, works exactly like the blue zone with the yellow stripes on the exit of Tertre Rouge. So you can use it. By the end of it, where the zone ends, you have to be back within the normal conventional bounds of the track. Some people use it. I don't. I find that the car gets so unsettled hopping over the curb, and it's such a short zone that I just don't gain any time from running wide and using it. Some people do, particularly I think in GT cars, which are a little bit slower. So personally, I just use the curb as a normal exit, and now it's flat down past the Ferris wheel, coming into the Ford chicanes. So let's break down the chicanes. Braking zone is basically where the pit lane splits off. So basically there, right before the solid line, right before the dotted line becomes solid, is the braking zone. So in 6th gear down to 3rd gear, and then downshifting to 2nd in the middle of the first Ford chicane. A little bit of power. There is a little bit of track space there that you can use, but the important thing is not taking so much speed. So there is more track here to the left that I'm not using. Again, the reason for that is setting up to the right in order to get the best entry to the 2nd Ford chicane. So 6th gear, down to 3rd, downshifting to 2nd, not using all the track on the left-hand side, a little bit of power to get the car turned in so that I can get a good entrance to the 2nd Ford chicane. So the 2nd Ford chicane is probably the more important of the two. You can see this curb is pretty gnarly on the left-hand side, and you've got 3 sausage curbs on the inside. You don't really want to get greedy with limits there because you can do damage to the floor of the car. You can send yourself, into the sand trap, and ruin your entrance onto the start-finish straight. So you just want to kind of touch the curb here, and you can see, I'm not getting on it that aggressively, but it does pitch the car over. It is a significant bump, and I'm sort of waiting for the car to settle until I can get on the power at the exit of the final part of the chicane. That's about as much of it as you want to use anymore, and you either won't get a good exit, or if you do something pretty severe, you can damage the car and end up in the runoff. And then on the exit onto the start-finish straight, you can see I'm over the curb. The green zone here is track limits violation if the center of your car goes over it. So I'm about as far to the left as you want to be. Any further to the left, and you can pick up an off-track. And then, again, this is a zone where, depending on whether I'm conserving or trying to deploy boost, I'll boost to the start-finish line, but I won't boost over it because I don't want to use any of my deployment allotment for the following lap. So just boosting up to 3rd gear, 4th gear or so, and then not boosting over the line. But again, if I'm on a conserve lap, I won't do any boosting at all. It only gains you a couple of tenths or so. And that is a lap of Le Mans. So thanks for joining me. Hope you enjoyed it, and catch you next time.